Good day and welcome to Agenda. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Danie Laurel. But even without Cito, let's begin the show with a Beltran trademark, the Daily Starter. Inspired by a verse from the book of Isaiah, the quote goes, "All the forces of darkness cannot stop what God has ordained." All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Philippine Star. The Philippines and Japan are eyeing to form a security triad with the United States. This as the two Asian countries have agreed to strengthen their military and security ties during President Bongbong Marcos' state visit in the land of the rising sun. Another news still from Tokyo. Japanese firms pledge electronics investments here in the Philippines. Malacanang says this would generate more than 10,000 jobs for Filipinos. We will be discussing more of that with our guests later on. Meanwhile, 9.6 million Filipinos were jobless in the fourth quarter of 2022. That is according to the latest survey of the Social Weather Stations or SWS. Former President Rodrigo Duterte tells the executive branch support the police's war on drugs. The former chief executive said this in a video posted online. The body of a Pinay initially reported missing has been found dead. That's in the rubble of the quake that hit Turkey. This as the death toll now tops 16,000. And Vice President and Concurrent Education Secretary Sara Duterte says the Southeast Asian region should make efforts to address the learning gaps exacerbated by the pandemic. Alright, so it's Agenda, and of course, I'm Danie Laurel sitting in for Cito Beltran. Ladies and gentlemen, it's day 3 of President Bongbong Marcos' official visit to Japan. How is he faring so far in his third foreign trip this year? Let's talk about this with our guest. But first, let's get to know him more in this video.
Eric de Torres is an associate professor at the University of the East Department of Political Science. De Torres was previously part of the consultative committee that focused on constitutional amendments during the Duterte administration.
Good morning, Prof, and welcome to Agenda.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning. It's good to be back, and I hope we could discuss and flesh out issues with regard to the president's state visit to Japan.
Exactly, no. So all eyes are on the president. This happens to be his 9th trip, abroad. Give us a general observation, first of all, of PBBM's visit in Japan so far. Is this something different than his previous visits to other countries? Is this different from previous administrations whenever they would go to Japan? Is there something particularly special about this visit, sir?
Well, of course, the deal is actually very special in terms of how we would establish a good diplomatic relations with the current Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida. We all know for a fact that before the previous administration have had a good diplomatic relations with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So I think it's really more of a confidence building and letting Japan know that Philippines is indeed an ally. Secondly, it's also a very advantageous on our end because we have to remember that this deal in strengthening regional peace and security with Japan is actually part of the AFP modernization program, which is basically the Horizon 2. So the second phase basically of such program that would somehow strengthen and develop our military capability. The deal which basically we entered in Japan is also the first major defense export of Japan.
Okay.
So it's really interesting on how we intend to develop our military capability, and what better way to be able to do so than Japan basically lending and providing enough technology with regard to this agreement specifically.
Prof, can you nuance this now? What do you mean by this is the first major defense export of Japan to the country, you mean, or in general?
In general, to the Philippines primarily. So we basically entered into a contract of establishing radar. So this is actually the first. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are 4 major infrastructures that will be developed, and this will be developed basically by General Electric. So it's very, very quite interesting in terms of how we would intensify and develop and again advance our military capability in terms of course, surveillance. And the radar, we all know for a fact, is a very important, a piece of technology in terms of how we would be able to detect if there's an imminent attack.
Okay.
So the technology is really very interesting, and we all know for a fact that if it is from Japan, it's very much reliable and credible for that matter.
Prof, has this been something that's been on the table for a while, or is this something specific to PBBM? What does this say about him as a leader when the focus is now on security with this visit?
Well, of course, it's really given that, of course, we all know for a fact that the West Philippine Sea, we have a fragile situation in the West Philippine Sea. I think PBBM is really capitalizing on the previous administration's gains, and we can see the continuity in terms of establishing the AFP modernization program. But not only, I think that PBBM is also pushing for regional, strengthening regional defense, getting Japan and the US on the table, but also getting enough investments for them to be able to invest here in the Philippines, and at the same time provide more jobs and better opportunities in our country, in our countrymen.
This comes, of course, at the heels of a state visit as well to Beijing. How does this compromise or diplomatic ties with China? It's very high tension right there. And now if they're going to be strengthening or even having possible joint military exercises in disputed waters with Japan, a triad, Japan and the US, how might Beijing react to this?
Well, of course, we could only second guess what Beijing is actually, thinking. But I think it's really also PBBM and the Philippines is really wanting to give or bring a balance between these superpowers, if you may. Especially, we all know for a fact that the PBBM also went to China, discussed important considerations with regard to how we intend to go about the West Philippine Sea. So I think PBBM is really wanting to bring a balance. Of course, we want really to not to be with friends with everybody and to get the benefits as more economic development, attract investments basically from this country. So it's really going to be very challenging in terms of how we intend to go about bringing balance between these strong countries or these superpowers, if you may.
Okay, so trying to get the best of everything, no?
Yes,
Eat your cake.
yes.
Sir, you've got Senate President Mig Zubiri proposing to form a VFA between the Philippines and Japan. So this would be even in addition to this, what you call this technology export, no? What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's actually a very welcoming move on our end. There's this saying that we should not put our egg into one basket and not entirely depend on the United States.
Okay.
And if, for example, should there be an imminent attack or threat, Japan is very near to us. Japan is the most viable country that could aid us should anything, war broke out or anything that might, an imminent attack happen. So all the way, Japan can very much, respond and help immediately our country should that thing happen in the future.
What would the US feel about that, which of course has been our, like you mentioned, our long-term ally when it comes to VFAs?
Well, of course, I think it's good to know on the part of the US because Japan is also an ally of the United States.
Okay.
So I think there won't be a problem on the part of the United States. Also, the way that we look at that, I think that US would be a piece in terms of looking at that Philippines or his ally in the Pacific is actually collaborating and partnering with one another to strengthen regional peace and security within the region.
Okay, so good idea for the US in principle, no? Prof, let's
Yeah.
shift towards the specificities of this particular trip of PBBM, no? He's brought a bunch of business delegates, something that he's done in previous trips, but he's also brought with him former President GMA. What does that bring to the table? Why is former President Arroyo considered an asset specifically in Japan? Is this something that the international community or the Japanese community is welcoming?
Yeah, for one, Danie, the way that we intend to look at it is that just about the first aspect in terms of strengthening regional peace and security, but also ensuring to get enough investments in our country. And of course, the expertise, the experience of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is highly valuable on the table. Secondly, her experience dealing with the Japanese during her administration, but more importantly, her technical capacity as an economist that would really help this administration to be able to get and identify areas of investments needed to be able to develop our economy and improve our economy as it is.
Can you give us some more color on that, no? During her administration, just for our viewers here to note, how strong were the ties between the Philippines and Japan? And maybe you can compare that also to former President Duterte and our administration now. It seems that we might be going back, like you mentioned, to the GMA times when it comes to this foreign policy.
Well, in terms of Danie, trade and agreement, also development assistance, there are many projects basically that were developed and that were funded by Japan, specifically the MRT. MRT Line 2. This is basically one of the flagship projects that Japan through the years has aided us. Especially it started during the time of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and of course we all know for a fact that in continuation with the Duterte administration, he has a very good and personal relationship with Shinzo Abe. And right now, as it is, what better way to be able to maintain and strengthen this good diplomatic relations to Japan than PBBM going directly to Japan and, bringing what his administration can offer to the table to strengthen our partnership with Japan. Also, we also have to consider that, especially during the time of the Arroyo administrations, that there was a certain degree, to a certain extent, stability in terms of inflation. For the past 10 years, relatively after the fiscal crisis in 2006, relatively the inflation during that time was very stable. So that alone, in terms of expertise on how the fiscal policy of the Arroyo administration would very much be appreciated to bring stability also in our challenging economy right now.
All right, so continuity basically, no? Just keeping the ties that we've already well established before. Prof, what do you think though about PBBM bringing a delegation of business persons, no? Has this worked so far, or even without bringing them, like you mentioned before, marami naman ang projects on the table. We've historically had a lot. What did this add, no? Just to highlight here, $4.6 billion was pledged during this visit. Was any of that because of the presence of these businessmen, or were these already on the table anyway?
Well, I think it's also within the presence of the businessmen that this businessman actually is more of, we are targeting specific industries, specific areas that they want to really actually invest in or invest at. For example, we're also looking at perhaps in terms of manufacturing, on the manufacturing side. We're also looking at perhaps also technology within the agriculture. So I think the delegates are very much important in terms of targeting as to what specific sector that we really intend to, bring these investments and bring these pledges basically. So it's not just about, President going to the Canada. It's also a way of looking at how serious is this administration of really identifying and developing areas of trade and manufacturing side to be able to carefully identify how we intend to develop our economy.
Give us an idea, Prof, of $4.6 billion of pledges. Malaki ba yan? Have we, because to us it's just a figure, but compared to, I don't know, our infrastructure investments that we need, the amount of money that we need to get back on our feet after pandemic-induced debt, the amounts of other countries investing in our country, madami ba to? And is this something that was expected or higher than expected? So is this successful when it comes to how much BBM has managed to get?
Well, it's actually a quite big amount.
Okay.
Okay, and in terms of how we would like to focus, and again, as we can only second guess as to what industry, I'm also looking at possibly, for example, infrastructure, to intensify infrastructure. We have so much gains with the Build program, and we are, of course, we will not be able to appreciate this, but we will instantly, we will appreciate this in the long term. We can also look at perhaps the administration can look at these pledges in terms of agricultural development.
Okay.
We have witnessed, and it magnified our challenges in terms of food productivity. So that would depend also in terms of how they intend to actually look at these investments in terms of areas that we actually lack, and to be able to also fill the gaps in terms of developing several areas in our country that we actually intend to improve.
Okay, and finally, Prof, before we let you go, there have been some criticisms that the President is traveling too much. This is his third foreign trip, ninth, this year pa lang, third already, ninth since he started his term. Maraming problema ang bansa, 14-year high of inflation, and then he is seen, of course, all over the world. But he has defended himself, saying, we need this, we need to introduce ourselves to the world. Should this be continuing? Is this justifiable?
Yeah, I think it's very much justifiable. You have to remember that former President Fidel Valdez Ramos was considered to be the most traveled president. This was also the approach of the former President Fidel Ramos. And after which in the middle of his administration, we were branded to be the Tiger Cub economy of Asia, because of Southeast Asia, because of how he was able to attract investments. How serious is he in promoting basically Philippines? So I think it is actually a good move on the part of the administration. People might criticize him because he always travel and so on and so forth. But what better way to be able to address the challenges in terms of our economy right now, to bring in basically investments. And these investments are actually very good to provide necessary jobs, to provide jobs, basically identify areas to be able to develop our industries and trade in the country. So I think it's very important in being able to promote our country. Ang kaibahan lang yan, syempre, yun, nakikita natin, pagbalik, merong mga pledges. Ang mahirap kung lumalabas tapos wala naman tayong pledges na nakukuha. So I think it's working for us.
Alright, so it's not just Swiss chalets and sushi, no? Dapat meron din 10,000 jobs na makukuha din. Thank you so much, Professor Eric de Torres of the University of the East. Thank you, sir. Agenda will return after a few messages. Stay with us. You're still watching Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel. Now, the Philippines and Japan have signed 7 new bilateral deals on a range of areas, including infrastructure and agriculture. What are the impacts of these agreements to the Filipino people? We will have our second guest to discuss this, but let's get to know him first in this video.
Ron Vilog is an associate professor at the De La Salle University International Studies Department. His areas of specialization include international development and migration. Vilog finished his doctorate degree at Nagoya University in Japan.
Good morning, Prof, and welcome to Agenda.
Good morning, Danie. Thanks for having me today.
All right, well, you're the perfect person to be on the show, no? Because you did your PhD in Japan, of all places. Of course, I wanted to, you come off of the heels of another professor from, a pol sci professor, of course, from UE, Professor Torres, who said, or he at least concurred with PBBM, saying that we need these types of visits, no? This on the heels of some criticism that he's been traveling too much. Can you agree with this statement that this is a very fruitful visit to Japan? It's something that the president needs to be doing continuously.
I think, yes, no, I do agree that these kinds of state visits are very important. The symbolic aspect of state visit is actually very crucial, no? Because it somehow affirms our alliance and it strengthens our friendship with another state. And again, since I am actually a migration scholar, you know, so I would say that this is a great opportunity for the president to physically face the Filipino community, the Filipino migrant community, and to make them feel that his government is taking care of them, and you know, to make them feel that the government will do everything it can to protect them and support them, and most importantly, make them feel that their loved ones in the Philippines are also under the care and protection of the government. No? So I think it is symbolic, but indeed it's very important. And I would say a state visit like this in Japan is actually very reasonable.
I'd love to touch on that, no, your specific expertise, because this is not just a matter of getting money, a matter of getting investments done, but like you mentioned, taking care of our own people who happen to be in Japan. Give us an idea, of course, of your studies. How are the Filipinos there doing after many, many years of bilateral ties and agreements? What types of jobs? Are there higher skilled jobs now? Are there a lot of education opportunities that you were able to tap as well? Give us an idea of how many Filipinos are in Japan and what is their life like there?
Well, there are around 130,000 Filipinos in Japan. It's actually the fourth largest group of foreign community, no? After Chinese, I think South Korea, Vietnam. So we're the fourth. No? Historically, of course, if you can recall, in the 1980s, we have actually sent a lot of entertainers in Japan. So in the 1980s, the Filipino community was dominated by our kababayans who were actually the so-called Japayuki. No?
Correct.
And that has various implications on our migration dynamics. No? Primarily because syempre, no, a lot of them are after 1995 kasi they were actually they already repatriated and the administration of GMA naman somehow revitalized this migration channel because of or through the so-called JPEPA. So we were able to forge that agreement with Japan. It's a mega treaty, Japan-Philippine Economic Partnership Agreement.
Okay.
And through this treaty, we were able to send nurses and caregivers to Japan.
Okay.
So it's actually good that we were able to open their labor market, especially for the healthcare sector. No. And now we can say that the composition of migrants are more diverse.
Okay.
We have high skilled workers. We have professional workers, engineers, nurses, caregivers, but we also have a lot of factory workers. We also have those who are, they are JFCs or Japanese Filipino children, and some are also Filipinos with with Japanese blood. We call them the descendants or the Nikkeijin. So the composition is more diverse, and of course it's more challenging na, no, for the government to really manage this migration channel. But what is interesting is that Japan is now more open to foreigners, because historically Japan was really not comfortable entertaining or accommodating foreign workers. But recently, through several policy changes, and of course, this is because of the demographic problem in Japan. It's an aging society. It's actually a society. They are having demographic problem, shrinking population. They need workers. They need workers who will be manning their industries. So it's important that they prioritize the immigration policy. And now I think the Japanese government has already been liberalizing it. No? So we are expecting more opportunities for our kababayans, for our OFWs. And it's also possible that Japan will accommodate more Filipino workers. I think this is also a part of the agenda of the president.
And the converse is also true, no? He in his meetings said, or at least invited, Japanese to come to the Philippines, and not just for manufacturing, which is a traditional industries, but to learn English. Give us more idea on that. Bakit nga there seem to be a lot of Koreans that like to study here, but Japanese usually come here because of work. They're expatriated, not necessarily from student ages. Give us more color on that. Why this hasn't happened when you would think that makes sense?
Well, even before the pandemic, I'm sure that we have already trained or educated foreigners, specifically from East Asia, Koreans.
Correct.
I think there were a lot of Korean training institutions, English schools, for Koreans, and now the Japanese investors have actually realized that it's also good if they can actually send their students to the Philippines. To have that short-term program. Even in the universities, of course, there are already a lot of exchange programs or exchange student agreements. It's actually good that Japan is already internationalizing. I think it's a part of their internationalization agenda, no? In the past, talagang Japan was actually it was
nuclear,
really difficult to look for or to encounter people who can speak good English, but now it's also a trend.
Interesting.
In Japan, and I think a lot of them would rather send their children to the Philippines. Is actually a cheaper option than sending their children to the United States or Australia or Europe.
And it's actually very interesting, though, because at least now, recently, you see so many Filipinos traveling to Japan on holidays because there are, of course, cheaper flights, easier to go to. You can even go there in the snow, in Niseko. Give us an idea of how big the tourism market is here for Japanese, and why that hasn't really developed. We see again a lot of Korean tourists, a lot of Chinese tourists come in, and for Japanese it doesn't seem to be the same. It's also not necessarily in the priority projects that the president discussed. It was mostly infrastructure, agriculture. What is happening in the tourism side?
I think it's a continuous effort of the government to really promote the Philippines. Yes, you're correct. No, I think we have a lot of Korean and even Chinese tourists in the past years. Um, but as far as I know, no, there are also very significant campaigns in Japan, no, wherein they really promote the Philippines to the Japanese tourists. Perhaps the only, the problem really is that there is a perception and sadly speaking, no, there is really a perception that the peace and order situation in the Philippines is not that stable.
Okay.
So that's
Until
how
today.
the Japanese
Perceive the country.
view. Yes, that's how they view the Philippines, no, and that somehow impacts on their decision, no, on where to travel. So
Medyo
I
risk
think
averse.
it's very important talaga to develop our infrastructure, and at the same time to make sure that the security of our tourists are also prioritized by the government.
You've touched on some touchy subjects here, no? And as a international development migration scholar, what about the negative issues that have hounded, of course, our relations? You even have this Luffy crime situation that now you've got 2 Japanese persons in the Philippine prisons detained here. You've got, of course, in the past, the comfort women in World War II. Have we gone past these issues? Is this something that still needs to be discussed from a diplomatic level?
Well, the government has already spoken about this. I think the Secretary of Department of Justice has already mentioned that Luffy's case is already being handled by DOJ. No?
Okay.
And the country's position on comfort women and the war-related claims has also been settled. As far as the government is concerned, no, so that's the statement or that's the position of the Philippine government. However, according to the DOJ, also the government will not really prevent private claims of Filipino comfort women. Should
And
such
Japan is
actions be
supportive
pursued
of this.
by victims on their behalf, no? So, well, it seems that really, no, the government. However, I think the Philippine government can still do a lot of things, no, to support the comfort women, our lolas, no, because how about providing them with more legal support so that they can further pursue that so-called private claims. So I think that's very important to prioritize.
Prof, how
para
many
naman masuportahan sila, no?
are these women?
Sorry.
How many are these women today?
I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics, no?
Okay.
But syempre, no, they're already very old, and some people are even saying that they're already losing they're still fighting a losing battle.
Correct.
Kasi they're already aging, and considering that the government is not really willing to help them, no, so it's really sad. But I think ayun nga, no, I personally think that it's really important that we provide them support, and most importantly, I think it's important that the government through DepEd and CHED support our lolas by also educating our youth about their narratives. Kasi nawawala na yung kwento ng mga comfort women. Hindi man lang sila manalo doon sa cost nila, no, for compensation and for a genuine apology. But definitely, sana their narratives will be heard by the young generation.
Prof, what was the stance of Japan on this matter? You mentioned that they did not receive an apology. Does that mean that this hasn't been addressed by the Japanese government?
Well, actually, there are a lot of apologies that have already been issued by the Japanese government. No, so even during the past visit of the emperor in the Philippines, I think there was a tone of apology.
Okay.
So apology is or has actually been issued, no? But what we're trying to, or
What
what
more
we're
can be
trying to
done?
argue
Oo.
is that the apology somehow is, or those apologies were not that genuine because,
I see. Okay.
for example, no, there were prime ministers who would be saying, sorry, we apologize for what happened. But after issuing that apology, they would actually go to the Yasukuni shrine, and that is the place where they actually express reverence, no, to
Okay.
their
Interesting.
to those who were actually accused of war crimes.
Okay.
So there was that certain
Conflicting.
degree of inconsistency, no. So the argument is that the apology seemed to be very superficial, and it's just a rhetoric, no, it's just a political rhetoric without meaning at all. So
Okay.
many comfort women are still saying that a genuine apology and and of course compensation package should actually be given to them.
Okay, so may hinanakit pa rin, no? That we feel this has not been fully addressed and we cannot necessarily completely move on. There's still a group of specific people that feel that this is unjust, no? Prof, let's discuss about the concerns of Japan when it comes to the Philippines. You mentioned already one issue, which is security, no? At least hindering tourists from coming in. But what about when it comes to business, doing business in the Philippines, the rule of law, for example, ease of doing business, bureaucracy? What are their thoughts on that when they look at the country as an investment place, especially?
I think for those who are already, dealing with Filipino businessmen and dealing with the Philippine bureaucracy, I think they're used to it. They're somehow used to it. No, the problem is that for those who are still, starting to invest in the Philippines, they're actually shocked with the kind of bureaucracy that we have. Of course, we know that Japanese investors or Japanese people in general, prioritize efficiency, and they value time. They value the talent and skills of the Filipinos. But the problem is that as what you've mentioned, when they come in, when they enter the Philippines, they're actually shocked with the kind of bureaucracy that we have. Recently, I think they were arguing that there should be some reforms when it comes to the taxes and the refunds. No, I think I've heard about that commentary recently. No, so I think that's very problematic. But as far as I can remember also, President Marcos has already approved a value-added tax reform program, for only for foreign tourists. And this will be effective by 2024. No? So this will definitely attract more Japanese tourists. By this, foreigners will be able to get VAT refund, on items that they are taking out of the country. So this is actually a good a good strategy. So
Prof,
basically
how integrated are the Japanese? I imagine, because you studied in Japan or have come back here to the country, so I imagine you have close ties with the Japanese community in the Philippines. How integrated are they here? We know other, for instance, I'm part of the French community that's quite integrated here already. They remarry, they marry Filipinos, they have children who are Eurasian. What about the Japanese community and the migration, the internal migration here to the Philippines? How is that?
Well, I would say that similar then, no? Similar to, at least for the Chinese, they have their own Chinese community, and even for the Koreans, no. But for the Japanese, they're somehow fragmented in the Philippines. I think, no, that's my observation. They are somehow fragmented. Of course, the business people would have their own associations, they have their own groups, no, and they have their own networks. So they live in various parts of the country, and they actually have several, cultural activities together. That's for the businessmen, no. But similarly, no, for those who are traveling here or coming here as students, or as uh, those who are traveling here as well, there are also
Business.
Japanese people, as what you mentioned, no, there are also Japanese people who are exploring the possibility of investing in the Philippines, and also those who are looking for schools, no. So I think they're more, fragmented as compared
Okay.
to the other foreign communities in the Philippines.
All right. So
Maybe because of their number.
number or cultural issues, like you mentioned, no? There's a nuclear situation even in Japan that just recently started globalizing, no? So thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive update, of course, on the Philippine-Japan relationship. Thank you so much. That was Associate Professor Ron Vilog of the De La Salle University International Studies Department.
Thank you very much, Danie.
Agenda will return after a few messages. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel. The Department of Education identified several challenges it faces when it comes to the delivery of basic education among Filipino learners. How do they plan on addressing these issues exactly? Let's get to know our last guest who will help us dig deeper into this topic.
Atty. Michael Poa currently serves as the spokesperson of the Education Department. Poa was the Chief of Staff for the Office of Trustees in the GSIS.
Good morning, Atty. Poa. Thank you for joining us on the line, sir.
Good morning, Ma'am Danie. Thank you for having us.
Alright, sir, maraming problema, no, that is not, hidden, that there are a lot of issues when it comes to education. But can you identify for us the top 3, top 5 main issues when it comes to education in this post-pandemic era?
Well, Ma'am Danie, to be honest, no, it's very difficult to pick a top 3 or top 5 because all these problems also have to be solved simultaneously.
Okay.
But yes, definitely, if you were to name a few, as reported by the Vice President Secretary of Education during the Basic Education Report last January 30, infrastructure is definitely a problem, no? And then aside from that, of course, our curriculum is something that needs to be reviewed and perhaps revised.
Okay.
And also, aside from that, we need to look at our teachers because obviously when we look at the quality of education, kailangan din talaga natin tingnan yung kung nagbibigyan natin ng tamang trainings or upskilling kung tawagin yung ating mga teachers. So if I were to look at it, we were to name yung ating mga issues, syempre we have to look at the school as an infrastructure. From the learner's perspective naman, yung curriculum, no? And of course, their well-being. And then, syempre, titingnan din natin yung teachers.
Okay, great. So let's parse through these 3 issues, no? I wanted to kick off with the teachers kasi parang without teachers, walang point yung curriculum tsaka yung infrastructure, no? And of course, we have this PBED study, that's the Philippine Business for Education. Only 2% of teacher education institutions in the country are considered as high-performing. 81% of schools were not high-performing. Tell us, why is this? What is the problem here? Is it the education, sir, of the teachers? Is it brain drain? They're leaving the country? Bakit po, in other professions, umaangat naman yung high skills, but when it comes to teachers, parang hindi?
Actually, Ma'am Danie, that's exactly what we're trying to determine. But kung ano talaga yung cause. But if we look at it, ano po kasi yung teachers, no? Meron tayong pre-service, which is yung kanilang education prior to becoming teachers.
Okay.
And then we have the licensure, of course, the licensure exam. And then after that, that's the in-service, kung nasa DepEd na po sila.
Okay.
So these 3 aspects are the things that we'd like to really improve, no? So pagdating sa pre-service, syempre po, nasa CHED po yan, no? Kasi nga, education courses or education degrees. Ngayon, pag sa licensing, syempre po, sa PRC po tayo, no? Because sila yung nagla-license, sila yung nagka-conduct ng examination, length examinations for our teachers. And then, pagdating naman sa in-service, yan yung sa DepEd.
Okay.
Wherein we should provide relevant trainings. Now, dito po sa tatlong aspect, ang maganda po, no, we have the Teacher Education Council.
Okay.
That we're really planning to, how do we say it, maybe activate, no? Because nag-convene na po sa pagkakaalam ko yung council. And dyan po ma-address yung mga issues natin sa mga teachers. Kasi yung members po ng council na yan ay first and foremost, as chairperson, the Secretary of Education, no? So from DepEd. And then, ex-officio members din po, yung CHED, yung PRC, at yung NCCA. So, these are the things that can be addressed by the Council. At yan naman po talaga yung layunin natin, is to really look at all aspects, not just one aspect, and try to find a holistic solution.
Okay, so it's not a matter of people don't want to become teachers. It's not a matter of people are leaving the country to teach elsewhere. Parang yung nangyayari sa mga nurses. We have some of the best nurses in the entire world. They just don't stay here. Sa atin, the problem with the teachers is more fundamental, in your opinion. So it's really a matter of the level of education that these teachers receive.
Well, I think as the Vice President has said, no, the system really failed them because we're not training them as much as we should.
Okay.
Of course, hindi natin binabaliwala yung mga benefits. No? So that's why on the part of DepEd, we always advocate for additional benefits. And, although the salaries of teachers are really dictated or determined by law, yung salary standardization law natin, tayo naman sa DepEd, we're looking at ways kung paano natin ma-augment yung benefits ng teachers. But of course, that's one aspect. But the other aspect, as you said, is probably more fundamental, which is really their training pre-service and their training in service. And of course, we also want to ensure that the LET or the licensure exam is relevant and responsive to the quality of teaching that we require. And so that is one aspect that probably needs to be reviewed also.
What's your tangible goal here, attorney? Do you have a X% that will pass the exam, a score that you can say that, okay, this is the quality that we want?
No, actually, because obviously DepEd, so pagdating naman sa licensure, it's really PRC. But we need to know if the questions are relevant, to the kind of teaching that we want. Now, for DepEd, what's a tangible
goal,
solution?
target?
It's really to provide, it's really to keep on upskilling and reskilling teachers. As you know, for example, in the pandemic, nagkaroon po tayo ng blended learning, distance learning, but we're not even sure that our teachers are well equipped to hold classes na online.
Correct.
Kasi iba po di ba? Iba yung pagtuturo. So, right now, those are the things we want to focus on, really make sure that we provide proper training programs and also graduate programs while they're in service. Example, right now, we have around 2,000 teachers that are taking yung ating mga graduate programs with the Philippine Normal University. We also have around 11,000 teachers taking trainings doon sa ating NAEAP or National Educators Academy. These are free. These trainings are free, no? The graduate programs are also scholarships, so they're free. But these are the things you want to be able to provide to teachers na hindi lang sila stagnant.
All right. Attorney, we have time for just one last question and I wanted to focus on infrastructure. Now na post-pandemic era na, and you've seen either the gains or the losses from hybrid learning, digitalization, what is the strategy of the Department of Education? Are we going to be continuing on this hybrid learning path? Upskilling our teachers, like you said, or are we going to try to be more fundamental, focus on the curriculum, focus on getting people back in the classrooms and learning as they used to learn?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So right now, we really want to get our learners back to school because hybrid or blended learning, of course, is something that we are also studying, but we must realize that there are areas that do not have internet. There are areas na mahirap po ma-implement rin yung ating online learning. But right now, so again, number one, we want to bring our learners back to school. In fact, that's effective, 5-day in-person classes for all public schools. Right now, around the last figure given to me was around 99.54% of our schools are already implementing in-person classes, 5 days a week. But aside from that, when it comes to infrastructure, kasi yan yung tanong natin when we break them back, So we have already created a new strand. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Parang isang buong department headed by an undersecretary to just focus on school infrastructure. That is something we can have prior. So that's what we did because we really wanted to focus on building more schools, building more classrooms, of course in coordination with DPWH.
All right, so physical infrastructure, get the students back to basics, back to learning, and focusing on the curriculum, focusing on the quality of teachers. Maybe saka na yung hybrid learning pag medyo okay na yung connection sa bansa. Thank you so much for all of your insights. That was Attorney Michael Poa, spokesperson of the Education Department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ma'am Danie. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone.
And that's today's agenda. Keep it here on Cignal TV channels 8 and 250 for the latest news. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time.